Well, it's been a long time. It's Labor Day. I'm back in the saddle, but as you can see, I'm looking up at you from down at the bottom here. Makes me look even smaller than I actually am. I mean, height-wise. Anyway, happy Labor Day weekend to you, and we're just listening to a little bit of The Police, Don't Stand So Close to Me. That's a good way to start the Labor Day weekend, I think. First of all, The Police and Don't Stand So Close to Me. Put those two ideas together in your head, and you have maybe a Labor Day parade. I'm not really sure, actually. I don't know where I'm going with that at all. So I just thought that I would sort of start September in a more, I don't know, health-oriented way. And I just want to let you know, too, that, I think I have her permission to say this, that Dr. Judy is great. She's fine. She's had a great summer. She's very busy, and we've been in touch. And for those that are concerned or thinking about her, we are all thinking of her, and so I just want to let you know that. And so for those that were listening to the PSYOP recovery program earlier in the year, we're hoping to do something later on when both of us have a bit more time. Meanwhile, I'm going to be starting school on, what is this? This is Sunday. I'm going to be starting on Tuesday. And so we're just getting things together in our respective lives. It's been a lot of busyness and a lot of things going on generally. What I mentioned in the description is that I've also been doing keto, which some of you may have heard of. It's a lifestyle thing. It's a lot of people look at it as weight management, and that's a really great way to start out with the whole keto idea. I think that for me, it started when Tom died last year. And for those that have kind of been following things, it's been a really crazy year and a half. I'm still living on the property of a friend of mine who is a teacher. It's become a little bit demanding. Now I have the mobile studio that some of you may know about. It's the Airstream studio, and so I can basically take the studio anywhere, plug it in, have an internet connection, and et voila. So that's kind of what I do, and so I want to continue to do that and sort of feel that I need to move along into other areas, and literally and figuratively, to be able to interview guests on location, to be able to do live broadcasts with bands, for instance. I did an interview with a couple of my Airbnb guests the other day, and it's been really fun to do Airbnb. It's also a lot of having to be around, and I think that's really excellent for a season, and then it's time to maybe have a little bit of my life back so that I can get back to my studies and also to doing my broadcast. So over the summer, it's just been a lot of rejigging of things. And that's been an ongoing process since Tom died. So I lived on an island on the west coast of Canada, and my partner Tom had been living in Vancouver. And so he bought a house over on Gabriola, and it was really great. I had my own place. The only problem is that it was rat infested, and housing is just at a premium on the West Coast generally, but particularly where I was living. And so I really didn't want to give up the house, but I helped Tom to find this house, and it was great. It was on 5 acres log house. My son called it the lodge. And it had river running through it, literally, a stream. Let's call it a stream, but sometimes it turned into a river. It had a rental property on the property. I think I did a really good job of finding a place for him. And, it wasn't that I wasn't, we were together and we were planning to get married. So I was eventually going to live there, but it was not something that I was going to do right away until the whole other thing happened, because he didn't feel like it was a good idea for me to live in that house. But, again, you hate to you're sort of living in denial because you go, oh, there's not that many places for rent. So the the bottom line is I sort of had a suite there, and I was, so it was kind of an interesting situation because I was able to have sort of my own area, and I was able to do my studies and that sort of thing, and yet be able to help and stoke the fires and make the dinners and do all that stuff, because he had been suffering from an illness, and presumably was on his way to getting better, and particularly when he moved from the city into the the country area, it was really good for it seemingly really good for his mind, if nothing else. Now, the problem with people who have addictions, in this case an addiction to alcohol, which I didn't recognize for what it was, is that they can get pretty sneaky, and I didn't understand that. Now, this is not a slag on Tom or his memory. I'm trying to share the story, and I do have a frog in my throat. I'm not verklempt. But it sort of sent me on a quest to find out what it is that creates this addiction. So that going forward turned into a discovery of ketosis and what our bodies really want to be doing as compared to what we've forced them to do through the food that we eat and the lifestyle that we live. So the idea of going into ketosis is just allowing our bodies to get to the point where the ketones are able to be released. And it's an hormonal reaction that takes place when our insulin levels are actually being controlled in a good way, not in the way that they're controlled by the junk food and the sugar. So I'll give you a little tiny bit of background on me, because some people may not have heard this. I've kind of I've interspersed it with my interviews sometimes, but when I was 6 years old, my mom was diagnosed with cancer, and she had a radical mastectomy. And I do mean radical. In those days, they would just take all of the, not only the breast, but all of the underlying tissue. They would take the muscle and everything else, because they were just afraid of the cancer spreading. And then my first real memories of doing things with her were going for radiation and chemotherapy. Of course, I didn't go for the treatments, but I went on a train with her we lived in a small town, and I went on the train to the bigger city to get these treatments, what she called poison. So she already had a sense, I guess, of health. She came from a family of 8 girls, and they had a pretty good lifestyle and a pretty good attitude toward keeping sugar out of the picture. But she really changed quite radically when she had cancer, and she started reading Adele Davis, Let's Eat Right to Keep Fit, or just Eat Right to Keep Fit. But if you find a copy of that, it's an interesting book. And a lot of what Adele Davis was saying then was pretty prescient. She actually knew what she was talking about. So, needless to say, my mother got quite into this. I mean, we were using laundry soap that didn't have dioxins in it, and she really got into. She was a hippie before there were hippies, even though she was born in 1916. So I came along later in life with her, but she had a lot of the ethics, I guess, even that her mother had given her. So they were old-fashioned, that had come all the way around. So we had a garden, and we had, some really cool aspects of our life, like the recycling that we were doing already. And you had to carry it around the back of the car. Of course, we're recycling, but my dad's driving a Buick, with this huge trunk. So you tell me if that one offsets the other. Anyway, her sisters had sent her squirrely bread when she was living in the small town that we lived in. And then squirrely bread is kind of like sprouted wheat bread, and they still make it. And you can get it to this day. So that was the thing that I had a hard time with, because with the keto diet, even sprouted wheat, the way that it's been altered, is a problem now. Um, Glycosfates. I have a hard time with words sometimes, remembering how to pronounce them. But, Roundup and all these different things that they started spraying caused a lot of problems with the wheat, as a lot of you will know, and that's why we have a lot of allergies. So the one thing that really remained, and I really thank her for, is the fact that she raised me without sugar. And so she called it white death. And she would use molasses sometimes. But molasses is kind of food. It's not, it's sweet, but it's not that sweet. So she would, have plums and stew them and then put a little bit of molasses in. She goes, it's going to be kind of tart. And so you kind of get used to that. And it was difficult for me to understand how people were so addicted to sugar, because it truly is something that, it sets off a whole chain of events within our bodies. And then it actually causes insulin to be secreted every time we consume sugar. And as it turns out, every time we consume carbs as well. Now, fat does not release sugar. So contrary to what we've learned by the sugar industry that's been putting out all of this propaganda, it's actually the fats that are good for you in terms of being sated, being having that feeling of fullness. If we have extra fat, it actually doesn't trigger that insulin effect. So there's certain things like butter, and there's cream cheese and all sorts of really yummy things. But all these low-fat things are not our friend. So I'm going to be going a little bit deeper into some of this stuff, and I'm going to be sort of talking to you about the journey and hoping that you'll embark on it with me. But for about 2 months now, I've been doing some fasting, which is part of it, because what you're doing is you're allowing your kidneys to actually, your liver to actually do their thing. Actually, both, and your gallbladder and all these things that are often overtaxed by constantly having to work when this insulin trigger goes off, the hormone trigger. Then it causes a whole chain of events to happen in our bodies. And also what happens is that we'll get this rush, and then actually we'll sometimes be even more tired afterwards. So a lot of people will, you get tired after a big meal. Think about after your big turkey dinner. You're eating all the carbs and that sort of thing, and that is causing that tiredness. Sometimes people say it's the turkey itself, but it's actually just the potatoes, the carbs, that sort of thing, and the sugar. And you get super full, and then, you get really tired. And then a little bit later, you start feeling peckish again. And usually you're wanting to go back and eat some more potatoes. So that, when you go into a state of ketosis, that goes away. And that was something that I didn't understand. Now, again, I have to tell you, I'm not addicted to sugar, but I really do. I like potatoes, and I thought squirrely bread was really healthy, and there's all sorts of things that we eat that have carbs in them. So this is carb restricted, but it's carb restricted in very specific ways, because vegetables have carbs, but if you eat leafy green vegetables, the ones that get the chlorophyll from the sun, from being above the ground, not the ones below the ground, then you're actually able to eat as much as you want. It's, and you can have pure olive oil, made into a lovely salad dressing. So it really doesn't feel like you're depriving yourself at all. It's just a change in the way that you see eating. And also the fasting part, as I mentioned, it just starts us off on a path that allows our body to have a chance to do all of the different functions that it needs to do. And it allows everything to go a little bit slower and not be pushed in terms of having to process all of the different elements to the food, particularly the carbs, and which basically creates insulin. So this is an hormonal problem. So people will say weight gain is hormonal. Well, yeah, it is, but it's not the kind of hormones you think. It's not because of menopause or any of the things that estrogen, all the things that women will talk about. And I knew that, I think, because after having had 4 kids, I continued to bounce back. And I actually, when I when I was pregnant with my 5th child, I think I was like 115 pounds or something. So I recognized that it wasn't the hormones from pregnancy, but when I had my 5th and 6th children, babies, I noticed that there was a change, and I thought there's like something weird happened with those pregnancies with my body. And in fact, babies can give off certain hormones, and there's a symbiotic relationship with the mom. And I wasn't so much off in that because I had my 5th and 6th children with my second husband. And so there were some hormonal differences. So I'm curious about looking into that as well. So it's not as though there aren't hormonal issues, but it's what those issues are. And the biggest thing right now is when looking at Tom's situation and diabetes and alcoholism and people who are just, they're hiding their sugar addiction. It's as bad as an alcoholic. I was listening to a guy talking to me about a friend who wasn't losing weight, and of course he was living at home, and his mom was monitoring his food intake and seeing, he's doing okay. Yeah, in the back of his car he had soda pop and chips, and he was just addicted. So in a lot of ways it reminds me of that thing of, my partner would put the alcohol into the freezer, and I didn't even know you could. I'm so dumb. Because I usually drink beer or wine or something like that, but he was drinking, vodka and all the gin, those things with the high alcohol content, and you could put those into the freezer, and you could sneak them out every once in a while. And so everyone has stories about their Uncle Joe or somebody who is sneaking alcohol, and then there's the people that are sneaking the sweets. Now, the interesting thing about the ketogenic lifestyle is you start on it, and people go, "Oh, well, what could I have instead of sugar?" And there are substitutes like monk fruit, and there's things that you can take that are not, but you cannot have sugar. It's just not possible. And sugar comes in all forms. So you look at packaged material and you see that there's even a small content of sugar or glucose in there. You can't have it. So it means you're going to probably have to be preparing food from scratch so that you know what you're consuming. But, there's some really great things that you can have, and you just have to be aware of what you're taking into your body. So I am starting down this path, and I thought, well, because it's September and it's kind of a new start, now it is the 2nd, so I was planning to start on the 1st, but that's okay. I want to take you through this process with me and be a support and be an encouragement. So as an esthetician, I used to do a lot of body work, and I was licensed to do certain things. So we were, I was doing massage as well, but we were talking about nutrition. And that was maybe 20, 25 years ago. And I really enjoyed that part of my job. I mean, I've been a variety of different things. I became an esthetician because I was a photographer and I had a studio, and I was doing wedding makeup and that sort of thing. And then I got into special effects makeup for theater. So that was one side of it. But because of this interest I had with my mom, because she was sick my whole life and she died when I was 24. So she got those extra years. She was sick when I was 6 years old. She was 48, and or 49. Anyway, she was fairly young. I thought she was very old, but she was young to have that kind of a diagnosis, and it really, I mean, it made a huge mark on her, literally, but it freaked me out a lot as a kid, and I'm really thankful to her for turning that situation into something that was good, and for me, that I was able to learn about nutrition. So it's always been there in my mind, and I thought, well, I'm just going to do this because I can see people around me that are getting ill and they're dying. And when I had to administer the medication and palliative care with my sister 10 years ago. She died in 2008, in July of 2008. And so I had that side of things, and then the other side is when you're asked when you want to pull the plug on somebody who isn't responding to anything. So these things have a really huge impact. And I did also talk about my first husband, Ken, who died in 1995. Now, he didn't have the same problems, but I'm pretty sure he was hypoglycemic because, as I say, he was a hitter. And I was always trying to figure out how to mitigate that because I really love the guy, but just couldn't be around the hitting part. And you would just see that it was sort of tied somehow to like a mood swing, and it seemed tied to food as well. So I've got a lot of this around me, and I would suggest that even people that are close to me and my family still have a lot of these issues. So while they're not addicted to alcohol, I think a lot of people are addicted to sugar, and they have sugar withdrawal, and it can come out in so many different ways, whether it's physical or mental health. And one of the things that happens when you're in ketosis is that when the ketones are released, they actually affect your brain. And they're doing studies right now, which I'm going to be talking about, and hopefully having some people on the show to talk about as well. But there are studies that say that the ketones actually affect in a positive way people who are in the early stages of Alzheimer's and dementia. So it not only has an effect on your kidneys and liver and gallbladder and all these things that are at the heart of some of things like fibromyalgia, chronic diseases that people are contending with. It's also is having an effect on our brains. And so there's a lot of clarity when you get into a state of ketosis. You go through some tough times, especially if you decide that you're going to do intermittent fasting. I chose to do I'm thinking it was, I didn't record it, but I think it was almost a 5-day fast. So I had water and nothing else. And you do go through some stages where you think, this is really dumb because what am I doing to my body? But I have to say that every major religion in the world has fasting as part of its right. Its sacred rite. It's a sacrificial, it's a sacrament. So it's very, very possible for the human body to be without food. We don't need to eat all the time. And this thing of, oh, we've got to eat 6 times a day, it's really ruining our bodies. And I'm down to where I just have 1 meal a day. And I know at first people just go, what? How do you survive? You can't just have 1 meal. But you can have as much as you want of certain types of food. And then you give your body a chance to fast. And so that can be intermittent fasting. So where you have a 4-hour window of eating and then you go 20 hours of not eating. So some people choose to do that. Some people have 2 meals a day. But I'm telling you, once you get into this way of life, you don't feel deprived at all. In fact, you feel very actually full all the time. And all I can do is tell you about it. But I'm really committed to helping people, whether it's that you do want to lose weight, because that's a way to maybe stave off diabetes. Perhaps you're hypoglycemic, which means you may be on the edge of being diagnosed with diabetes. And these are not only problems that affect people who are overweight. There are a lot of people that appear to be healthy, and they're still, if they were to get tested, they might be surprised to find out the results. So that's going to be the focus. I'm going to be doing other interviews as well, but I am going to be really focusing on the keto lifestyle, and hopefully you'll go along this journey with me. I mean, I've lost weight and gone down clothes sizes, this isn't about the scale. It's about, you can usually tell that you're getting healthier. But it's more than that. It just is this, as I say, a sense of being sated and not feeling deprived, having clarity. And I just feel like I really want to give that to my audience, because I think we're not going to be able to face some of the things that we're having to deal with in the world until we have our own house in order. And I think this is all part of that, is to take care of our temple, our bodies and our minds, so that we have the clarity. And I also think that a lot of the division and problems that are taking place are because of the food that they're foisting on us. That, we go into the store and we just pick up these packages, and seriously, folks, it's poison. So I'm just going to show you the website here, and that's the site that I have put together for this. Is called Keto Me, and so keto.me, and you can go there and get, what I'm going to be doing is putting some information on there so you can get a little overview at this point. I've just started out with the site, but you'll be introduced to Dr. Jason Fung. You'll be introduced to Dr. Eric Berg, and several other people who are researchers, and people who are medical doctors, chiropractors, and practitioners of various types who have gone through their own experiences and can give you firsthand understanding of what's really happening in the body, and what a keto diet is about, and how it all works, and what happens when we go into ketosis. So those basic things are on the website, and I'm adding some recipes as well. There's things like, my mom used to make mayonnaise from scratch. You don't even recognize that there's sugar in mayonnaise. There's sugar in ketchup. There's sugar in all the condiments, and there's things like MSG that absolutely cause huge problems for the insulin and the hormonal levels in your body. So I'm going to just start you off with that. And hopefully we'll start September this way. At the very beginning of the year, Dr. Judy and I were talking about this year being dedicated to telling the truth, and really working on that. And I think this is just another part of that function of getting to the place where we're telling the truth and being willing to face some of the things in our lives that we've been kind of in denial about. And I just have a real desire to go on this path with you, and you with me, to encourage me, because I'm sure there are a lot of people that have lots of experience with this and might be able to help others who come on to the channel and want to get a little bit of encouragement. So I'm hoping that we can create that little bit of a community as well. And so I'm going to leave you with that. I wanted to keep this kind of short and sweet. And I think what I'm going to do is see what we've got here. What else can we have to play us out? I also want to have some music, since they've demonetized me anyway. So I am trying to get back to where I can offset some of my expenses in my life and the running of the studio through the channel. And it's been kind of a difficult few months. I did reapply for monetization, but basically they don't want anybody to be talking about anything other than a very specific group of topics. And apparently when they looked at my channel, and it's probably a lot to do with the PSYOP recovery program, but this is part of the PSYOP recovery. And I think getting into a keto lifestyle, for me, it's not a diet. It's not an Atkins diet or any of this stuff. And it's free. This is what I love. The thing is, you can get to the point where you can cut your grocery bill in half. And so people will say, oh, I can't afford to buy, natural or organic vegetables or whatever. You're going to have a lot more money to spend on whatever it is that you want to do. And you're going to get to the point where you don't even feel deprived. So there was a month there where I really didn't have a lot of income. And it was actually great to have that coincide with starting the ketogenic, the fasting, that sort of thing. So now I am not recommending fasting or any of this stuff as a practitioner. I'm just counseling as far as what I've found to be helpful and useful. And I really hope that you'll look into the studies. There's one that I've got on the Keto Me site at this point. So I'm going to be really focusing on studies so that we can take a look at them together and see what the newest and latest stuff is. So with that, I am going to, I said I was going to come up with some music here, and I have a lot of great music. A lot of people don't know about Tony Joe White, but he's pretty amazing. I was introduced to him when I was a teenager by a musician. And so this is Tony Joe White. Who you gonna hoodoo now?
Coffee skin, little bit of cream, golden eyes with a touch of green, hot cheekbone, kinda tall. You won't think twice if you think at all. She like a panther on the prowl. Who you gonna hoodoo now? Had a residence down in Covington. I knew she had a sweet tooth, so I bought her some. Like stay out late, dance all night long. She would only make love at the break of dawn. She took me up so high I can't look down. Where you gonna hoodoo now? searched it all with a fine-tooth comb. I know I ought to leave that woman alone. Heard about a place, St. Francisville, a little rehabilitation to cure your ills. But I don't think they